Question 1. Ms. Martha is teaching her students to label kitchen items by reading out a list of possible items to the students and then asking them to label items. If she wanted to test mastery of labeling kitchen items, which of the following components is critical? All right, so let's evaluate this intervention. What is our goal? Well, it says we want to master labeling kitchen items. That is what Miss Martha is trying to teach. How is she teaching it? She is first reading out a list of possible items to the students and then asking them to label items. So what jumps out at you? What are you thinking? To me, I'm thinking that looks like a prompt. If I just ask you to go into the kitchen and start labeling things, that's different than me reading out a list of items first and then asking you to label. So if she wants to really test true mastery of these labeled items, what does she need to do? A, echoic training. Doesn't matter if the kids can echo what Miss Martha is saying. No, that's not the skill we're working on. We're working on pure text. We want the students to be able to just walk in the kitchen and start labeling fridge, sink, trash can. What about interverbal training? Again, no, we're working on labeling. We're not working on Miss Martha prompting them or giving them an SD to go label things. They just need to be able to walk in and identify different things in the kitchen without any additional verbal SDs. What about modeling? Do we want the kids to be able to model the skill? Well, maybe eventually, but before they can model the skill, they need to actually be able to demonstrate the skill, right? Additionally, we don't want Miss Martha to provide any further prompting. Okay, that's the whole idea. So what we're really trying to do is what? We're trying to fade the prompt. Right now, labeling the item is under the control of this prompt. In order to test true mastery of this labeling skill, we need to completely fade out all prompts and then see if they can label these kitchen items. Our answer here is D, prompt fading. That is G4 on the task list. You decide you want to use a chaining procedure to teach your client how to pack their lunch. If you want to determine the steps needed to pack a lunch, which of the following procedures would you use? Seems like a pretty straightforward question to me. We're talking chaining procedures. And when we talk chaining procedures, there's not a whole lot to think about, right? What terms do we know related to chaining? Well, we have task analysis, we have task chaining, forward chaining, backwards chaining, total task chaining, and a behavior chain interruption strategy. Chaining is very straightforward. If you want to determine the steps needed to pack the actual lunch, well, what are you doing? Are you conducting a functional analysis? Are you manipulating antecedents and consequences to determine the function of a behavior? No, so we can eliminate A. Are you conducting a chaining analysis? No, we're trying to create the chain. And if we want to create the chain by breaking down the complex skill into simpler steps, we are conducting a what? We are conducting a C, a task analysis. Are we taking baseline data? Well, not yet. We don't have the steps yet. We first need the chain. And to get the chain, we need to conduct our analysis of the task. So we have to conduct a C, a task analysis. That's G8. It's so important that you know your terms and definitions. Most people I tutor who fail don't know their terms and definitions, and they're not fluent enough in terms and definitions. They say, well, I can't apply it, or I go too fast, or the questions are too hard. 90% of the time, you don't know your terms well enough. Okay. When you're reviewing your questions that you get wrong, go back, use the task list study guide. Okay. Understand the definitions of these terms. That's the most important piece, right? If you don't know the terms and the definitions, the test becomes a lot harder. Okay, next question. In the usual suspects, a witness is brought in to try and identify the person he saw committing the crime out of a lineup. If the witness responds by pointing to the criminal when the police chief says, okay, who did it? What skill would the witness be using? Well, a lineup, right? We have, let's say, 5 or 6 people against a wall, and the witness in this case is going to pick out who did the crime or who they think did the crime. And in order to do that, what do they need to do? Do they need to discriminate? Yes, right? What is discrimination in applied behavior analysis? It's simply telling the difference between two stimuli. And in order to identify the correct criminal, this witness is going to need to be able to discriminate between several different people. Now, what about response differentiation? What is response differentiation? The easy way to remember the difference between discrimination and differentiation. Discrimination deals with the stimuli. We're telling the difference between stimuli. Differentiation, we are engaging in different responses. So discrimination is stimuli, differentiation is responses. Pointing to the criminal is the same response, but he needs to point to the right criminal, which involves discriminating between stimuli. Now, what about tacting? Okay. What about tacting? Is he labeling? Yes, in a way, he's labeling the criminal. But what evoked the label? The SD, the verbal SD of okay, who did it? So it's actually an interverbal. Okay. A tact is evoked by a nonverbal SD. Again, super important verbal operants that we know what evokes them and what doesn't. And then echoing would be the witness repeating what the police chief said, which did not occur. Our answer is going to be A, discrimination, task list G10. Jenna describes the behavior plan in great detail to the RBT and the stakeholders. Jenna ends her description by saying, if the client is off task for 10 or less seconds, that does not count as a response. What is Jenna doing at the end of her description? What part of the prompt or the question are we worried about? We're worried about what is Jenna doing at the end of her description. When you get a long question with a lot of detail, identify the important parts. So what does Jenna do at the end of her description? She says, if the client is off task for 10 or less seconds, that does not count as a response. Okay, so that's important. So what is she doing? A, describing the type of measurement that will be used. Did Jenna mention any sort of measurement procedure? Do you see frequency in here? Do you see discontinuous measurement? Do you see permanent product? No, we're not sure what type of measurement we're using. She doesn't describe it. So A is out. B, using a non-example. Is this a non-example? What is a non-example? Well, this is a great example of a non-example, okay? Understanding what we're looking for is important. Understanding what we're not looking for is also very important. You must use non-examples. So we know, let's just assume our behavior is off task. If my client goes off task for 1 second, does that count? If we didn't have this non-example, we would say yes. This non-example is helping us specify what we're looking for. The non-example of 10 or less seconds lets the RBT and the stakeholders know this is not an example of what we're looking for. Jenna is using a non-example. B is our answer. Read all of your answer choices, understand why they're wrong. C, using an example. This is not an example. This is a non-example. Big difference. And then D, explaining the behavior subjectively so that it is easier to identify. Do we explain behavior subjectively? No. Jenna is being objective about this. She's saying we know the client goes off task. If it occurs for 10 or less seconds, we're not counting that as a response. You can objectively measure 10 or less seconds. So what is Jenna doing at the end of her description? B, using a non-example. Task list H1. A client engages in escape behavior whenever it is time to get his haircut. He will flap out of the chair and onto the floor repeatedly. The client's BCBA tells the RBT to teach the client to request for his iPad instead of flopping to the floor. What has the BCBA done wrong? All right, big mistake that a lot of new BCBAs and even, older BCBAs, nobody's perfect, but this is a mistake we make, okay? What is the function of the flopping? It's to escape. If the client or if the BCBA is telling the RBT to teach the client to ask for his iPad instead of flopping to the floor, is that meeting the same function? What is the client obtaining by requesting for his iPad? Well, he's getting the iPad, he's getting a tangible, but is he escaping from the haircut? No, right? So now maybe he requests for his iPad and then flops anyway. Now he's got his iPad and he flopped, okay? What's the problem there? A, nothing. This is an appropriate intervention. Functional communication is certainly important. It's certainly a good intervention, but there's an issue here with how this was set up and what we're targeting, okay? So A is wrong. B, an iPad should not be used as part of an intervention. Now, if it's reinforcing, it's reinforcing, right? And it's not us to say what should and shouldn't be used. Okay, that's going to be client specific. In this case, it seems an iPad is totally fine. B is wrong. C, the replacement behavior is not functionally equivalent. Yes. When we pick replacement behaviors, they need to meet the same function as the behavior we're replacing. The client is not trying to get tangibles. We know the function is escape. The client wants to get out of this haircut. Teaching them to ask for the iPad doesn't help them meet the function of escape. So again, what will most likely happen is he'll get the iPad and then he'll continue escaping, right? It's not functionally equivalent. We need to use that fair pair rule. When you take away a behavior like flopping out of the chair, the behavior we replace it with has to be functionally equivalent. And then D, the BCBA is reinforcing flopping to the floor. No, I mean it's correct. It's not reinforcing the flopping. We're teaching them to ask for the iPad instead of flopping. Okay. However, that's not teaching the functionally equivalent behavior of flopping. So the client is still going to try to escape. He's just going to have to do it a different way. And eventually he's just going to go back to flopping. So what has the BCBA done wrong? C, the replacement behavior is not functionally equivalent. Task list H4. Behavior analytics supervision ensures all of the following except what? So as a BCBA, you will most likely be providing supervision. Whether that person is under you officially depends on their standing on in your portal on the board, but that's neither here nor there. Point is, you need to understand how behavior analytics supervision works. And when we provide behavior analytics supervision, what are we trying to accomplish? What are we ensuring? A, that treatment is provided properly. Absolutely. First and foremost, right? Treatment needs to be done properly. That's the whole reason we conduct supervision. That's going to be your job now as a BCBA or a BCABA. It's your job to go out there, train, give feedback, make sure your treatment plan is done correctly. What about B, that the session is as easy as possible for the supervising? Is our job always easy? No. If you say yes, I just don't believe you. Okay. There are times in this field, no matter who you're working with humans. Humans are difficult. It is not our job to ensure that the session is as easy as possible for the supervising. Sometimes it's going to be difficult. Now, we want to set up our supervising for success, right training, right stimuli, et cetera, but we can't just go in there and say, well, we're going to make your life as easy as possible, even if it compromises our client. It's not what we do. Okay, so B looks like our best answer. Can we find a better answer? C, that the supervisee is well trained. Absolutely. It's now part of your job to make sure your supervisees are well trained. You are responsible for your supervisees and what they do. And then D, that we provide the best chance for the best outcome. Certainly. We always want the most socially valid, most meaningful outcomes for our clients. Supervision ensures we get there. So what aren't we ensuring with behavior analytics supervision? B, that the session is as easy as possible for the supervisee. Task list I1. The client needs to earn 5 tokens to earn 10 minutes of iPad time. The first token is delivered after 2 responses. The second token after 3 responses. The third token after 4 responses. The fourth token after 2 responses. And the last token after 4 responses. What type of reinforcement schedule is this client on? So this is going to be a basic reinforcement schedule question. Should be very easy for you. How do we know it's a basic schedule? Because we only have one schedule in play, right? Compound schedules are 2 or more, but this is only 1. So first, we ask ourselves, we're dealing with a ratio and intervals, right? So we need to ask ourselves, are we dealing with time or responses? If we're dealing with time, we're looking at intervals. If we're dealing with responses, we're looking at ratios. Clearly, this is responses. It says so in the question many times. So we have a ratio schedule. Looking at our answer choices, they're all ratios. So we need to go to our next question. Is it fixed or is it variable? Fixed, meaning the number of responses doesn't change. The response requirement doesn't change. Variable, meaning we are taking an average number of responses. Okay. So do we have a fixed number of responses? Well, we have 2, then 3, then 4, then 2, then 4. We're all over the place. But in the end, we will get an average number of responses required. So we're looking at a variable schedule. So we know it's a variable ratio, so B or D. And now we just find the average. So 2 plus 3, 5, 5 plus 4, 9, 9 plus 2, 11. 11 plus 4 is 15. That's our total. Divide by total number of data points, which is 5, and you're going to get a VR3. So what type of reinforcement schedule is the client on? VR3. Task list B5. Very straightforward question, okay? If this one isn't easy for you, you need to go back to B5 and review your schedules because compound schedules are a lot more complicated than these basic ones. You finally potty train your son. Every morning he requests to use the toilet at your house and he no longer has accidents, even at night. School is reporting that your son will not man for the toilet and he will not use the toilet while at school. What area of generalization should you prioritize? Pretty straightforward question. You just got to be a little careful. If we look at our answer choices, I always tell you to attack the question and predict first, okay? So you really should be doing that. But we just want to kind of make a point, right? Because we're looking at types of generalization and we can generalize across people, settings, time, objects, on and on, right? So what do we know about generalization with your son? Well, he uses it at your house. He's fine in the morning. He has no accidents at night. So home is fine. Time of day seems okay, right? Because he's fine at night. He's fine in the morning. The issue seems to be what? The issue seems to be environment. This happens all the time with our clients, right? At home, they're perfectly fine. They get to school or they get to clinic, they no longer can go. So what area of generalization should we prioritize? Should we prioritize across people? Well, there's no indication it's a people issue, okay? We just don't get any information or enough information that it's across people. Now, if there's not a better option, we could pick people, but let's see if we have a better option. Settings. Settings is going to be a better option. We just have more information backing up that he has problems in different settings, okay? Home versus school, that's an issue. Time, like we talked about, he does fine in the morning and at night. It's really just between home and school. And then across objects, the toilet doesn't seem to be the issue as far as we know. Again, we're just using the information given. The only information we know is he does fine at home. He struggles at school. We need to worry about settings. Task list B11. A client often tantrums while in the grocery store with his dad. Your BCBA wants to determine the function of this behavior, so the BCBA sits down with the dad and asks what usually happens before and after the tantrum behavior occurs. What type of data is the BCBA taking? So let's predict this one. Let's attack it. What jumps out at you? Well, to me, what jumps out is the client tantruming, obviously. The BCBA sits down with the dad and he asks for before and after behaviors. So three things are coming to mind, right? I'm thinking, or really two main things, right? The first is I'm thinking indirect data, right? Because what are we doing? We're interviewing the dad. We're not looking at the client tantrum. Second, I'm thinking ABC data. Before and after, we're talking antecedents, consequences. So going into the answer choices, this is what's in my head. That's my thought process. That's what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm looking to choose. So A, direct. We just eliminated direct, right? Because we're interviewing the dad. We're not looking at the tantrums. B, indirect. That was one of our predictions. Absolutely indirect data. This is an interview. So B looks like our answer. Is there a better answer? Is there still ABC available? What about functional analysis? Are we manipulating antecedents and consequences? No, we're just interviewing dad. Functional analysis is also direct. And then frequency. Are we counting anything? Are we looking at how many? No. Our answer is simply B. This is a good example. If you attack the question, you break it down, you spend 90% of your time on the question, 10% of the time on the answer choices, you're going to do a lot better because you're going to be predicting, okay, what you think is the answer. And once you get to answer choices, all right, you've already got in your mind some possible solutions, okay? So we want to be on the attack and not the defense. So this is task list C2. When describing behavior, which of the following answer choices is not relevant to our description? All right. Describing behavior. We know what? We know it needs to be objective. It needs to be measurable. We want to know why it happens, what it looks like, maybe the intensity. All these things are important, right? So knowing that, now we're going to go to our answer choices and say, okay, which of the following is not relevant? Well, is A, magnitude relevant? Sure, what is magnitude? Magnitude is just intensity, right? You know, how loud is it? How soft is it? How quiet is it? Okay. How hot is it? The magnitude of the behavior is important, right? It's going to give us a little more color onto what we're looking for. Function, absolutely. The most important piece of any behavior is why it occurs. So B is 100% relevant. And then C, topography. What does that behavior look like? Function and topography go hand in hand. We always need both of those, right? Magnitude is kind of like that third little brother, okay? Not always spoken about, but also very relevant to what we're talking about. So all three of these are relevant. D, none of the above, that's going to be our best answer, right? So of the following answer choices, which is not relevant? Well, none of these. All of them are relevant.